This video is sponsored by STREAMYARD. If you're an aspiring content creator but don't know where to start, this all-in-one platform is essential for all of your recording, editing, and publishing needs. And by using our code or following the link in the description, STREAMYARD is giving our viewers $10 off their first month subscription. So what are you waiting for, horror fans? Start creating, streaming, and posting today. Good evening, campers, streamers, and babysitters, and we are talking about a pretty special film in our friendship and just the podcast as a whole. No, this is one that I know Luke has been wanting to talk about for quite a while. I know it was on the docket at one point for a full podcast episode, and this movie has not only a video game coming out, but I believe it just celebrated a pretty big anniversary, if I am correct. And that is Killer Klowns from Outer Space. Luke, this is a film that I know is near and dear to your heart, so I'm going to let you take it away here. Tell the audience a little bit about Killer Klowns, how you got to know it, and just why this movie means so much to you.
Well, you know, this film is about clowns that kill people, and they are, in fact, from outer space. So, yes, the title does live up to the name. I got to say, that is what sold me as a kid on this. Going into this, I never actually owned the VHS. I wish I did today because that thing goes for wild prices on eBay. I wish I could acquire one of those, but maybe when we hit the big jackpot, the big leagues with the podcast, we'll be able to afford that. But I did watch this as a kid. This was a fun special treat for me because I guess I could get my aunt into a little bit of trouble here, but I don't think the FBI is coming for her, and maybe that whole it was so far away, maybe that legal trouble is gone. But you know how you would always, there would be a movie on TV and you'd pop in your blank VHS tape and you'd record it. My aunt had a blank tape that she had recorded Killer Klowns from Outer Space on. So anytime we would go over to her house, I would beg to watch Killer Klowns, and that would be like, no matter if there was a party going, anything like that, by the end of the night I would have Killer Klowns from Outer Space on the TV, because I would absolutely love, if we did not get to watch the entire film, I had to fast forward to when they go into the actual spaceship, because that is when I was just absolutely enthralled with this film. So I didn't see this on TV too much until I got older, actually. So it was never something that played on TV regularly. It was something that I would always have to wait to go to my aunt's house to watch, and it was just so much fun. It was never, I think it had its scary moments for me, but I always found it more tongue-in-cheek, always a fun time for me to watch this, just because of the concept was so wild of these just giant clowns chasing people. And I will say, the part that did terrify me is when is it Slim? I can't remember, but is outside of the Big Top Burger and talking to the little girl. For me, that always creeped me out.
Yes, I think it is Slim.
But yeah, this one was part of my childhood growing up, and it is still something I watch regularly even today.
This one was not part of my childhood. This was actually something that was talked about a lot, though. I remember my grandparents, just kind of tongue-in-cheek always saying, oh, you guys got to watch Killer Klowns from Outer Space. That and Attack of the Killer Tomatoes and things like that. So it's like, it's one of those, but it just never, I think, got around to us. Like, we were big Gremlins kids, my cousins and I. Critters came on a couple times, at least the first one. And, just Killer Klowns just never made it. But it was something that I've known about, like, I feel like my entire existence. It wasn't until I was in high school, this was on Netflix, when streaming was really early. It was one of their, like, really early streaming titles. And that's when I first sat down and watched it. And I'm going to be honest, it was probably my cynical kind of, like, teenage angst in head. And I was just like, I don't understand why people like this. Is kind of goofy. But as I got older, and revisited it and, kind of got out of that phase, I absolutely adore this movie. And this most recent time watching it, I can say, watching it with my son there and experiencing it with my wife for the first time, who's never seen it, it was just such a treat. This is, honestly, I have said this a few times on this show, but I was saying it to you before, from an effects standpoint, and I think just from a concept in general, this is one of those movies that I think is truly timeless. I think it's one of those that you kind of captured lightning in a bottle here, and I do not say that lightly. I think that this movie is a perfect balance of creepy and fun, and just every time that you think that you've seen the pinnacle of zaniness and weirdness and horror in this film, they just go another step further. And I am begging the question throughout this entire video here. It's the title of our video, but I don't understand why this didn't get a franchise. Why this movie specifically didn't spawn a medley of different sequels, because this is such a strong idea. And I think that like everything from the costumes to even just the concept being just super simple. This is like something right out of a 50s serial, like comic book or something. Like it's just, it all works so well. And maybe it was just the time it came out. I don't know, but for me, sitting in 2024, this was such a treat.
And from what I was able to gather, I believe this did not do big bucks at the box office. And I think it just was due to the time that it came out. When you look at it in 1988, we're getting what Jason Takes Manhattan. We're kind of at the tail end. We're kind of running on fumes in terms of that big horror boom as we step into the 90s. And yes, we do have some iconic films trickle in, but it wasn't really till the mid 90s with Scream where it kind of reignited that horror boom that we got toward the later half of the 90s. And that wasn't really something in terms of, that was more kind of teen based. I Know What You Did Last Summer, The Faculty, Idle Hands, where it was more revolving around the kind of teen issues rather than something so zany as Killer Klowns. And I think, if Killer Klowns had come out in 1983, I could easily see us, having at least 3 other installments until we got into the 90s for this one, just because it is such a fun concept, and I think my wife is in the same boat with you in terms of finding this on Netflix. She used to watch this all the time, and she used to always turn it on. She absolutely loved it. It was one of our first conversations. I couldn't believe she knew about Killer Klowns from Outer Space. But, when I asked her if she wanted to watch it, she was all on board to actually check this one out. She goes, I used to watch this all the time on Netflix. And I think that's where a lot of people did find this. And, because over the past, I would say over probably 6-8 years, there's always been those rumblings of potential sequel. I know Netflix was in talks at one point to potentially even do a TV series. So it's kind of one of those things where I think with the resurgence of horror nowadays and kind of finding those iconic properties, I think Killer Klowns is certainly in that conversation now. I think it was just a product at the time where it was like, what are we going to do with these Killer Klowns in the 90s? I don't think a lot of people were going to buy it. But now, looking at it, and I think a lot of people have a love for that kind of 80s cheesiness and zaniness. I think a lot of people would be on board to see a sequel nowadays.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, the big reason that we're talking about this is because, as most of you guys know, next Tuesday, the video game is coming out. And I know this is hotly anticipated. We've been covering it since like early on with the start of this channel 2 years ago. I remember the news dropped that they were making an asymmetrical video game out of this. And, it's been so awesome to kind of see again, you're right, this resurgence from the Killer Klowns, and now it seems like it's really coming to a head with this video game's release. But not even that. Like, if you go into like Spirit Halloween every year, the Killer Clown stuff has just been growing significantly. I know this past Halloween, I think I picked you up a bobblehead. Was it this past Halloween, or was it one before I picked you up that bobblehead?
It was this past Halloween. I think it was for my birthday, technically. Was the little the clown boys that he's coming out of the toilet, and those, yes. And that's where it's like, the merchandise over the past, I would say, 3 years has been booming in terms of Killer Klowns. The section has just been growing every time you go in there. I think, was it just this past Halloween they released the little ray guns, the cotton candy guns?
Yes, the ray gun and everything were big.
And then we have the big cocoons and stuff. So, the merchandise is just ever growing here, and it's always great to see. I think, in terms of actual horror merchandise, I put this up with like Child's Play, where it's just so marketable. It's so bright. It's so intriguing, that it's so versatile. With the acidic pies and things and the snow globes. I think, in terms of merchandise, it's so endless with Killer Klowns, and it's so much fun.
Absolutely. And I mean, speaking of fun, I think like one of the big standouts and why this film has kind of stood the test of time, I would say, is because, like, again, these effects, they are by all standards, goofy looking. They are strange looking, and in a lot of ways, and I mean this with all of the love and care in the world, looking a little bit cheap to some people. But like the way that this film is aging, it's aging like a fine wine, in my opinion, where it's like the effects, the older they get, I think the better they look, because you see so much detail. And I think, like, I was telling Luke before this, I just grabbed the recent release of the 4K on Steelbook from Walmart, and I watched this thing in 4K. The transfer is beautiful. Scream Factory did an amazing job, and just the effects and the amount of detail that goes into each one of these clowns. And it's not like the main three are the stars of the show and then the other ones are just kind of, we're slapping some face paint on some people and calling it a day. No, every single clown and creature you see in this film is immaculately super detailed, and they just all look so weird and wild, and they have this kind of uncanny nature to them where it's like at one moment you kind of want to laugh and smile, and the next minute you're a bit disturbed. Like Luke said, that sequence with the little girl where I think you're right, it is was it Slim who's trying to kind of like
Yeah, I think
get her to
I
come
think it
over
was
to him.
Slim.
That's just creepy shit, man. Like that is just awful to see. And the implication, obviously, we've had a lot of horror films like It, with Pennywise and children, and then obviously there have been many serial killers in our lives who've donned clown masks. So you get a lot of that imagery, but to see this in its most like monstrous form, it's just something that I will always love about this movie.
Yeah, and looking at it, they kind of meld that. It's same thing with Pennywise, but I think maybe this is even to a heightened extent. It's certainly from the '90s TV series there, where you look at the killer clowns and they really meld that, you know, what we find, that innocence in terms of that childlike nature with these clowns, but then that demented look to them, where it looks like there's just something off with them, which I absolutely love because there's something terrorizing about them. Even when you see them, you're intrigued, but then you're put off completely by just their movements and how they do things. One of my favorite kills is when we kind of meld this clown lore into everything is when Slim does the big shadow puppet of the T-Rex and eats
Yes.
up all the people, and it kind of goes into that tongue-in-cheekiness, the zaniness of this actual film, where you're in it just to have a great time, and I think the effects certainly add to the charm here. It has that 80s charm where it's like you look at some of those 80s films and maybe some of the effects don't look the best in through a 2024 lens, but I think it adds to that charm. It adds to the fun, where even though we're getting further removed from the 80s, I still think it's like a time capsule. You can sit down, you can have a lot of fun watching this film, and those crazy effects, they add so much to it, and it's really leaning into that lore and kind of opening that up. We have an acidic pie kill, which I absolutely adore in this thing, because it's that kind of endless bits that we see with killer clowns, and this is what, like an hour 25, I think. It's like I could not imagine getting a sequel and seeing what more expansion of the lore we could get, or even having an extra 15 minutes, because they jam pack the thing with so many different kills, so much intrigue, so much different lore, where a lot of critiques that we see on modern films nowadays is they didn't go full tilt with it, and I could say
Hmm.
Killer Clowns from Outer Space is easily a film that I would emphasize and say they didn't go killer clowns with it. When we talked about Blood and Honey, that the first film, it was like we instantly brought up killer clowns in that conversation. Of we would love them to kind of really establish some wild lore like they did in Killer Clowns, and I think they did it with that second one. But I think a lot of horror filmmakers really go back to Killer Clowns in terms of setting the mood, setting the town, setting the lore, because this is how you do it.
I completely agree, and kind of setting it in. It does have a lot of those classic '80s tropes where you're kind of just following into. This feels like a town that's like straight out of the Blob or something
Yes.
like that, where it's like it is that classic '80s town. You've got the adults playing teenagers who are running around, going to make out point, doing all this stuff. I love the brothers. I forget their names, who own the ice cream truck. It's like it's just a wonderful like a eclectic group of people. I think that obviously the clowns steal the show, But I really don't think that Mike and Debbie are bad characters in and of themselves. I think that they do offer a little bit of something to grab onto. I know they're kind of just our vessels, and they're kind of there just to solve the issue. But this is one of those films where I think that the main stars are the clowns, and they don't waste a single frame with them. Another thing, I know I'm kind of jumping around here, but I wanted to mention was I believe it's Slim, but isn't he? Or no, it's Spiky, the one who has the bloodhound dogs, the balloon bloodhounds.
Yes, yes.
Oh my god! Like, it's the creativity there. Just it's something that I will always admire about this movie. And like you said, they took an idea and they really swung for the fences with this. And getting to again revisit this after some time and just get to kind of get wrapped up in it, it feels like I say horror comfort food a lot, but this just feels like you're sitting down on a cool October evening and you're just having like a cup of hot chocolate or coffee or something. You're just like, it's just nice. It just felt good to sit down and watch this movie and have a smile across my face.
Yeah, this is always a go-to for me. I own the Arrow release right now. I'm certainly going to pick up that 4K. It's just a compulsion in terms of wanting to own so many different copies. It's like the Blob. But, in that aspect of it, in terms of world building, this is something when, you sit down and you want to do any sort of screenwriting, certainly for horror, and you want to world build and, set that town. Something like The Blob and also Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Those are two films. Those are my go-tos in terms of, encapsulating that 80s feel, that natural town feeling where it's like you want to get lost in that town. And yes, they don't open up our human characters too much, but when you have Mike and Debbie there and then you add Dave in, I think that is an interesting dynamic that they do have to kind of give it, have that dynamic stand out a little bit, where we're not diving too deep into the lore or backstories of our human characters, but just enough to kind of get you on board and kind of, have the Mike and Dave at odds a little bit when we're kind of dealing with Debbie, which I always find fun.
Yeah, it's almost like what you maybe would have seen in 1988's The Blob had Paul not bit the dust so early in the film. That's kind of wild that both these films came out the same year, 1988. Just now making that connection. Yeah. And I did allude to a significant date. This was actually last year was the 35-year anniversary. But so don't sue me or anything. But this is 36 years as of just a couple days ago, May 27th. So, honestly, between this and the video game, I am so excited to be living in a world where we get pumped up about Killer Clowns from Outer Space. And this has just been a wonderful short but very fruitful trip down memory lane with this one. And that doesn't really stop here, because we were lucky enough to get in contact with the folks over at Ilphonic, the folks who made Killer Clowns from Outer Space, the game, and they have supplied us with a couple of review copies. So we are going to be streaming our live reactions and review this Saturday at 9 p.m. We're going to sit down with us, a couple of friends. We are in talks with a few other content creators on the channel here, all within the horror space, all horror, aficionados and Killer Clowns fans. Some maybe have never seen it, but are planning on watching it before we sit down and do it. This is going to be a fun one. We're going to sit down with you guys on stream, play the game, really get to sink into it. I mean, Luke and I are not the biggest video game people, but we love our Killer Clowns, and I'm excited to dive in and see what little nuggets, Easter eggs, details they've put into this thing. And I'm, again, not the biggest fan of these asymmetrical horror games, but when we have a full crew of just people that are just friends, this might be the best exposure we get. So join us, again, 9 p.m. on Saturday. We're going to be knocking this thing out of the park. Luke, how are you feeling about Killer Clowns, the video game?
I'm excited. I'm going to put on my my onesie, my clown shoes, and my clown paints, and hopefully put some humanoids in the cotton candy cocoons. Or, I think I have to mention, or else someone will eat us up in the comments, one of the best kills in the actual film. Maybe we can punch someone's head off just like Shorty does. And, of course, we got to play that classic theme from the Dickies. So those are two things.
As long as we don't get copyright struck, yeah, I'm down. Like, I hope that doesn't happen. But yeah, no, this is this is definitely just a wonderful movie, and again, I'm really happy to be living in a world where we get to talk about this and celebrate it. And yeah, let us know down below, guys. How are you feeling about Killer Clowns from Outer Space? Is this something that you haven't revisited in a long time? Is it something maybe you're now more excited to check out? Was this something you grew up watching, or was this something you discovered later in life? I'm very curious to see where we fall on it, because yes, I think there is kind of that kind of split between generations where you have people who either saw it because of parents' influence, relatives' influence, or were alive when it came out, and then people who, like myself, who found it when it hit streaming later on in life. So it's like, it's just such an odd dichotomy. I'm really excited to see those comments and see what you guys think. So keep it here with us. Definitely see you guys on Saturday. And yeah, other than that, we got a lot of great stuff up on the channel. Mike Flanagan apparently doing a new Exorcist movie. That's pretty cool. As well as Luke and I just put out our best of 2024 so far. So if you guys want to know what we're thinking of the year so far with 2024 horror, we got that out there. We talk about a whole medley of films, and all films we discuss have reviews. So lots of great stuff up on the channel for you guys. And yeah, it's going to wrap us up here. So until next time, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.
Do the horror shit, gonna do it live. Cause Splattercast kick it every day they live. Splattercast, slash ass. 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 Splattercast, slash ass.